Welcome to Comprehensive Sexuality Education 101, crash course for parents on this topic. Pretty straightforward agenda. We're going to open in prayer. Then I'll give a brief intro to the topic. We'll welcome our keynote speaker, Karen England, to enlighten us on what she knows, and then we'll close it out. Slide. There. But first, our opening prayer with Miss Kathy Harms.
Thanks, Robin. If you could just bow your heads for a moment and let's give this to the Lord tonight. Father God, we thank you for your grace and your mercy. We thank you, Father, for your faithfulness. And we ask that tonight that you restore vision into this place, into this community, into this state for what children are, what you've prepared them to be, and what your intentions are. Your words in Proverbs remind us that without a vision, my people perish. And it continues to say that they cast off restraint. And when we teach without that in mind, that's lawlessness. And that's the kinds of things, Father God, that we are praying that you restore. Because right now we're teaching children to lust after the flesh, to lust after the eyes, and the sinful pride of life. Because there is not a context to these teachings of loving and caring relationships. There is not consequences that are being taught for behaviors that are being encouraged. So tonight, God, we ask, Lord, that you would restore purpose, because we know where purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. And when we teach children things that are not according to your word, and the loving kindness that you have for them, and the plans and the purposes that you have for them, that is abuse. So we ask tonight that you would restore purpose. And in the mouth of these teachers tonight, Father God, I pray words would be spoken, Father, that would plant seeds, that would produce fruit 100-fold, Father, across this community. We thank you for our children. We ask, God, again tonight, that you protect them through those that have come to hear, and most importantly, those who have come to teach and instruct. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kathy. That was amazing. Allow me to introduce myself. For those who might not know me, I'm Robin Steenman. I'm the chapter chair for Williamson County Moms for Liberty. I'm a veteran of the Air Force. I flew the B-1 bomber. I've been married for 12 years, and I'm a mother of 3 to a 2-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And I have lots of time in my life to do this. Today's event is part of our 2022 to 2023 school year for parents, in which parents are getting smart on these issues right alongside their kids in school. So we've covered one critical topic per month since September. In February, the critical issue that we are focusing on now is comprehensive sexuality education, also known as CSE. So when we focus on one of these topics, what does that really mean? What are we doing in the course of a month? There's a few things. One, we've assigned a reading. So there's a book club that's covering this book, a book that best covers the topic, and that book club is actually meeting on Thursday. We chose to read Strange New World, How Thinkers and Activists Redefined Identity and Spawned the Sexual Revolution. We've got CSE 101 tonight. And then next week, CSE 102, which is the virtual follow-on. I hope you'll tune in. I'll cover that in more detail later on. We do a true-false quiz for parents so that at the end of the month, if I can get it written, then you can test your knowledge on what you've learned in the course of the month, see how smart you are on these issues. And of course, we build a toolkit for parents on our website in the resource library. Also at the end of the month, and you'll notice is blank right now, is the assessment of where Williamson County Schools ranks on this ideology. So far, it does not appear to be severe here, but we are waiting on the fruition of some Freedom of Information Act records requests before we render that final assessment. Slide. So, what is comprehensive sexuality education? We all have ideas of what we experienced in school. And it looks maybe a little bit like that. Kind of vanilla. These are the parts of the body. This is generally how it works. And we assume that that's what our kids are learning today, or at least something inside those guardrails. Not at all. So here's a quick rundown on comprehensive sexuality education, and I have learned that you don't call it sex ed, you call it sexuality education, and that is by design, because the World Health Organization, when they define sexuality, they include pleasure, eroticism, lifestyle, and so if they teach sexuality education, they can also include those elements in their curriculum. So it's a misnomer to just call it sex ed. It's not just sex ed anymore. It is underpinned, in fact, the foundation of CSE is the research done by Alfred Kinsey, founder of the Sex Research Institute at the University of Indiana back in the 40s. He favored, and this is not guessing, this is on the record, bestiality, pedophilia, incest, polyamory, and sadomasochism. And pretty much all of those things are things that he took part in his research with the subjects. That's also recorded. The curriculums are written by Planned Parenthood and SECUS. Also, those same two entities are massive lobby machines at state capitals and at the national level for legislation to mandate CSE. They are really happy with the outcome in California with the 2015 legislation that happened here, there. They are not so happy with Tennessee. But make no mistake, they're watching Tennessee and Texas and Florida. So, and they have a lot of money behind them. Also, SECUS, the original name, was founded by the former director of Planned Parenthood, so they're almost one and the same ideologically. But the original name was the Sex Information and Education Council of the United States. It was less than 10 years ago that they're like, let's get rid of the official name. Let's just say what we really are. And on their website, it is Sex Ed for Social Change. That is supposedly what SECUS stands for, but they didn't change the acronym. So they sound really official, but it is Sex Ed for Social Change. I know that because I went to their website trying to figure out what SECUS meant. It took a while. Eventually, I found the press release where they announced this change. So, CSE believes that children are sexual beings from womb to tomb. And if you look at the research of Kinsey, then you understand where they get that. There's the infamous Table 34, which documents the systematic, criminal, and unethical sexual abuse of children, which Karen England's going to cover a little more in detail tonight. They prioritize sexual and social ideology over medically complete information. They call it medically accurate, but to call it medically complete would be a total misnomer, if not a lie, because they really cherry pick the information that they give to your teens or even their kindergartners. And they'll say, hey, practice safe sex with any partner that you want. Just use a condom and you'll be fine. But they don't provide the information that the condom does not cover for these things and still has these inherent risk factors. And girls, if you want to have a family someday, you might be jeopardizing it by engaging in these acts. That information is left out. So that's what I mean when I say incomplete. Because of that definition, or maybe supported by the definition for the World Health Organization, this teaching encompasses not only sex, but gender identities, sexual orientation, eroticism, and experimentation. It normalizes and defends its use of porn in the classroom.
A little bit. But what are the hallmarks of a program in the curriculum that you'd see in a classroom? It's taught to children. They don't ask for parental permission. It normalizes things like anal and oral sex, really. It has a weird, obsessive focus on pleasure for kids. It promotes and encourages expansion, exploration, experimentation with gender identity and sexual orientation. And it teaches our kids how to give and get consent for sex, and they're minors. It's exposing children to visual and written pornography. And a lot of the links that your kids are going to be sent to and recommended that they go visit for more information, that's where a lot of the danger lies. So you're not going to see it on my slides, and you might not even hear it from the teacher. But especially if Planned Parenthood is coming into the classroom, which is one of your number one resources here in Santa Barbara, they're going to say, go to our website. Go visit our website. Go find some more information, kids. They'll even be invited to do some of those things right there in class from their electronic devices. This stuff is pornographic. Talk to your kids and make sure you find out what they're being exposed to. Now, this is what's actually happening, but if you were to look at a notice that would go home, it would look something like this. This is a typical notice, and it just says that the family life or the sex ed unit is happening, and it's going to include human anatomy, reproduction, and STDs. Didn't hear anything about anal sex in there, and didn't hear anything about gender issues or anything else. So watch out for those notices. You're not getting the full truth.
So I feel sorry for her. That battle is lost in California. And while Tennessee has good laws, make no mistake, Tennessee is a battleground. So the smarter that we are to head this stuff off at the pass, then our children benefit for generations. So I've said a lot of things about comprehensive sexuality education, but I'm a big fan of backup. So don't take my word for it. This is an article from just last December. The Planned Parenthood director claims kids are sexual beings, womb to tomb, while promoting useful porn in the classroom. I made nothing up. From this article, Planned Parenthood said in a guide entitled The Fundamentals of Teaching Sexuality that sexuality is a part of life through all the ages and stages, babies, elders, and everyone in between. Does that sound like Kinsey's Table 34? And again, last December, all that BS by Kinsey, they still fully embrace as hard science and the foundations for their teaching. Sex education from kindergarten through 12th grade and porn literacy for certain ages. They lobby Congress. And in 2015, he said, we have in our society an assumption of asexuality of people with intellectual disabilities. It's a myth that's perpetuated, and we really are sexual beings from birth until death. Around the year 2012, this individual said children of a certain age should be taught about pornography in sex education, a position he has maintained as recently as last year. And an article from Planned Parenthood in Florida is Florida needs comprehensive sex ed, not hand-wringing over porn. They're saying it out loud. They support porn for children as young as kindergarten. I don't have to guess and I don't have to conjecture. And I love it when they say the quiet part out loud. So from SECUS, you dig around on their website a little bit, and I just scratched the surface. There's a blog with this graphic in it. Whoops. Sex ed is LGBTQ, reproductive justice, violence prevention, but also social change. Sex ed for social change, that is SECUS. They are not really trying to educate children for healthy lifestyles or to prevent STIs or success in life. Their whole goal is social change. What does that sound like? Cultural revolution? And then also I thought this was interesting. Did you know that May is Masturbation May? They want to teach your kids about it. Also on SECUS's website, this is a fairly recent development from what I can tell, but they have reports, they have profiles on every state. So I pulled up Tennessee to see what they had to say. It's a 14-page document. California's was only 8 pages. They're not nearly so concerned with California as they are with Tennessee. 8 pages was legislation that they are carefully tracking as recent as last year. I even saw HB 1944 in there, the library bill that failed. They were definitely watching that one. So, I keep hitting the wrong button. Also, I can't read it now, but they have stats per SECUS of Tennessee. So percentages of every time a teacher taught a certain subject, like relationships, but as you get to the bottom, reported teaching about gender roles, gender identity, or gender expression. In Tennessee, 15.4% of teachers taught that to grades 6 through 8, and 55.6% taught that to high school kids. And then at a glance, SECUS acknowledges that our laws are pretty good as long as we're following them. And I thought it was interesting, the little plug for funding at the bottom. To learn more about federal funding streams, click here. So yes, comprehensive sex ed is federally funded sexualization of children. So also from a parent's perspective, when we're just looking around on Twitter or we're watching the Twitter feeds of the other Moms for Liberty chapters, what are we seeing? What are we observing? This was shared just last week. And the caption reads, Al Vernaccio is a sex educator for kids ages 3 to 18 in Pennsylvania. And they have a quote, but I'll let you hear it from him.
At my school, I'm responsible for the sexuality education of all of our students, from our youngest students, who are 3 years old in nursery school, up through our 12th graders, who are turning 18 and getting ready to leave high school. That's a huge range, but every single one of those kids is a sexual being. They have been since birth. And at every age and stage, we can offer them age-appropriate, transformative sexuality education. I'm only a small part of the village that supports them as they grow. It's not enough that I teach them. We have to teach them. Part of my message today is that we all, no matter what else we do in life, need to find a way to be sexuality educators for the kids in our lives. If we don't step up, others will. And many of those others don't see wholeness and freedom the way we do. One of the things we can celebrate today is how young people have so many more options to consider than simply whether they feel like a boy or a girl, or whether they identify as gay, straight, or bisexual. Our understandings of both gender and orientation have greatly expanded in our culture. And there's an ever-increasing list of labels one can use to describe oneself. To me, this is a great benefit because it allows people, especially young people, to find a more precise way to describe their own experience. What it's also brought about is greater latitude in experimenting with different identities. It's not uncommon today for young people to try out different labels and different pronouns and different relationships in search of their truth.
Again, I don't have to say it, he said it. So if you scroll down on this tweet, there's Gays Against Groomers. What's on Al's hard drive? I think that sums it up. This guy even kind of looks like Kinsey to me. He would not be permitted within a mile of my children. This is the last guy on the world I would want to teach my daughters about sex or sexuality. And then the original tweeter says, quoted this article that's titled, "This Quaker sex ed teacher says your kids need to be porn literate." Moms for Liberty in Lake County, Illinois, also tweeted about comprehensive sex ed, just some screenshots, and Twitter censored them. So that brings me to the expert in this field, who's going to shine more light on the topic, and especially how it pertains in Tennessee and Williamson County and surrounding counties. Please give a warm welcome to the president of Capital Resource Institute, Ms. Karen England.
Thank you. I always feel kind of odd when, you know what, can we move this so I can stand on the side? When someone says, I know a lot about this. How many of you know who Pastor Jack Hibbs, Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills? Okay. I work very closely with them, and I was going there to speak one day, and from the pulpit, I come home from my church, And I turn it on, and I'm watching it, and all of a sudden I hear Pastor Jack saying, and you know what? Karen England is coming for this Wednesday night, and she knows everything there is to know about sex. And sex education, I mean, he's like going on and on. I was like texting him, Pastor Jack, you're making me sound so awful. Anyway, so thank you for having me. We're going to have quite a crash course. It's going to be like drinking from a fire hose. I was going to start, I'm going to start because Robin brought up speaking. It was Church United speaking in Santa Barbara, the Protect Our Kids organization, about the comprehensive sex ed law that was passed in 2015 in California. What I want you all to know, there are only 2 people and organizations that ever wrote, in California you write letters of opposition and they formally get put on the record for who supports things and who opposes. And usually the support is 3 pages long of all the progressive liberal groups, and then ours is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only 2 organizations opposed that bill. Ours was one of them, Capital Resource Institute, and the other one was California Right to Life. I testified against that bill. We are trying to tell people what it meant, what the language was saying, what the unintended consequences were going to be, and no one would listen. They're finding out now, as Church United and the Protect Our Kids, and it's too late because they wouldn't heed the call. Because the law is really, really bad in California. You cannot teach only abstinence. You cannot have an opt-in. It's bad. Oh, I went backwards. Okay, so we're just going to talk about sex ed in general, a little bit of the history. After we talk about the history, we're going to go into the history of Tennessee a little bit, and then what I'm finding throughout the state of Tennessee. So as Robin mentioned, it used to be a simple biology lesson when we were going to school. It was, they would explain the moral and healthy choices. For boys, it would be, oh, you need to start showering and shaving, and you stink, use deodorant. You know, it was the basics, menstrual cycles. In today's sex ed, you're not going to find much biology in any of it. As a matter of fact, more often than not, there's 1 or 2 lines that are what you would think is going to be taught there. So you wonder how that happened. And those of you, I saw that you saw a video earlier, but we're going to play a video. Forget that it's a little bit cartoonish. It's all true. It goes very fast. And then I'm going to talk about and back up the information on Kinsey. But you can email us. We've got this in some of our emails on our website so that you can distribute it to your friends. But this is a quick crash course on Kinsey.
Alfred Kinsey. He's known as the father of the sexual revolution, the founder of sexology, and the framer of modern sex ed.
Hello, I'm Dr. Alfred Kinsey.
Alfred Kinsey is the father of sexology.
Alfred Kinsey, the Kinsey scale.
You can thank one guy for that, Alfred Kinsey.
While he's often portrayed as a self-sacrificing saint scientist, Kinsey was a bad dude who ran a bunch of bad boys. And I mean really bad. Kinsey was complicit in the sexual abuse of children. His own published works included data tables showing children as young as 2 months being, quote, stimulated to, quote, orgasm, while screaming and writhing in pain. He had this data on 200 young boys under the age of 15. But we still revere him and use his data, because being canceled is for statues and working class dudes who said a bad thing on Twitter, not child predators who did bad research. Kinsey may have done bad things, but that doesn't mean we can throw out his good data, because he didn't produce any. Kinsey's research famously found that people of the 1940s weren't following the sexual morals of their time, which isn't surprising because he oversampled prisoners, homosexuals, prostitutes, and other people living outside the status quo of that era, and then claimed that data represented the entire population. His data also suffered from the fatal flaw of being based on self-reporting. Who in the 40s is going to tell their sexual history to a complete stranger? Freaky people, that's who. You heard it here, but don't take my word for it. Abraham Maslow criticized Kinsey and refused to work with him for this exact reason. It's just bad science. And he got away with some other unethical stuff too. As PBS described, he hired a photographer to film volunteers and members of his research staff engaging in sexual activity. Porn! He made porn with his staff members. That's what that means. You know, for research. Kinsey purportedly found 26% of married women and 50% of married men cheat. That's 17% to over 50% of farm boys have sex with animals, and that pedophilic abuse isn't necessarily harmful to children. And many of these findings have been uncritically accepted, even though his research included obvious sampling biases and flat-out lies. Why? As humans will basically accept anything as true as long as it tells us we're good people. Whether you're a complete deviant or a relatively unafraid person, if you believe Kinsey's findings, you're gonna come away thinking, hey, I guess I'm not that bad. How does this affect us today? Well, one of Kinsey's most groundbreaking findings was that chastity is supposedly impossible. Speak for yourself, bud. Sadly, this kind of thinking entirely defines comprehensive sex ed curriculums, and that's no coincidence. Kinsey disciple Mary Caldrone founded SECUS, and Kinsey's co-author Pomeroy, who openly advocated for incest between adults and children, by the way, was among the founding board members. SECUS pioneered comprehensive sex education and still influences national policy on sex ed standards today. And it's all based on the assumptions of a man who was neither hero nor cartoon villain, a mere mediocre pervert and creep who did what any sick person in such a position would do: spread his disease.
Don't let them spread it to your child. Parents across the country are pushing back against so-called comprehensive sex ed. Join the fight. Don't let people you wouldn't leave your kid alone with determine how they should be taught about sex.
Thank you so much for...
Everything he said is true. Modern sex ed began as a result of Kinsey, his fraudulent research, and I am so thankful. How many of you have heard of Dr. Judith Reisman? What a feisty, committed, faithful fighter for our kids, and it was sad when she passed away a year and a half ago. I got to spend quite a bit of time with Dr. Reisman. She lived in California with her family for a while, and I was introduced to her years ago and read all the books and Table 34, all of that, and it's just sickening, because I'm going to raise some kind of sickening things as we go through some of this work. But it began in the 60s, and as a result, there are so many policies in the United States that have changed as a result of those two books. And you need to know, Dr. Reisman wrote several books. She even had one where she wrote about the different laws that changed. It just as an example, you know, rape in some places used to get the death penalty. But because of Kinsey's studies and it becoming, oh, men just have these sexual urges they can't overcome, these studies were used to lessen crimes against women and children. And again, Dr. Kinsey, does anyone know what kind of a doctor he was? He was a zoologist. Yeah, I'm so sad Liam Neeson from Taken was in that movie. Okay, so he set out to prove, probably because he was a pedophile, that children are sexual from birth, you've heard that, and believed his research was needed and that it would change all of the gender and sexual norms of society. And it has. There were others involved, and she brought up money, but there was Kinsey, Calderon, Pomeroy, money, and others that bought into that. And they would push his different false reports and studies. So based in part on interviews with incarcerated criminals, this was his sample. You know, he wasn't interviewing happily monogamous married people. His scientific study was on incarcerated criminals, prostitutes, pedophiles, and not normal, healthy members of society. And then he applied those findings to the rest of the population. And we're still living with that. I know it sounds, well, maybe not after COVID. Sounds hard to believe that this went on and that people weren't awake to it. And I want to encourage you to Google Dr. Judith Reisman on Phil Donahue so you can get an accurate kind of picture of who she was. It's an hour long, or I would have brought it. But she knew her stuff. She was feisty as all get out, and she was not going to let Phil Donahue bully her. So Dr. Reisman had had a child that had been sexually abused, and she had seen this book, or this table, in the library one day. And she said, wow, an 11-month-old having 10 orgasms in 38 minutes. No one else had said, how do they know that? How do you know that a 5-month-old has 3 orgasms? How do you know that a 2-year-old in 65 minutes has anywhere from 7 to 11? This is Kinsey's own work right here. I mean, if that doesn't admit it for you. So I want to talk a little bit about Mary Calderon. She was a Kinsey enthusiast. She'd been the medical director of Planned Parenthood and then used money from Hugh Hefner to start SECUS. Now, Robin mentioned SECUS. It was December of 2019 when SECUS sent out a press release and said something those of us that have been tracking with sex education and trying to alert people, on for years and years and years, they said, their press release said, SECUS is sex ed for social change. You will never hear us say SECUS again without our tagline, sex ed for social change. Okay, they are the carrying on of the Kinsey. Planned Parenthood is just another offshoot of this. But what do they mean by this? When Robin showed the list that was up there, I think 2 lines were kind of blurred together. And one of the last ones was dismantling white supremacy. So I'm not sure what sex ed has to do about that, but that is what their plan is. And so that was the bottom one was the SECUS sex ed. These are all promoters of K through 12 sex education. So the bottom line is this: it's a social movement, and it's going to remain a social movement. And they've come a long way. The stuff in California, people kind of make fun of me, but anal sex rolls off my tongue because that's what they consider medically accurate and age appropriate because they believe you're sexual from birth. So when you see medically accurate and age appropriate, usually in the law, they're defined as some sort of peer-reviewed article. And so technically they're getting away with it. So that's why, if you teach sex ed in California, if you choose to teach it, right now it's only mandated in middle school and high school, if you choose to teach it younger, you must teach anal sex. So what do we mean by social change? Here's what they mean: a desensitized world. They want to insulate the school setting and introduce these things, talk openly, and wear down your children's inhibitions. They want a reordered world. And this is going to make sense, looking at what happened with COVID. Parents are peripheral. It's a trusted adult. Schools and other agencies have full access to children and make decisions without parental knowledge or consent. They want a self-centered world. No matter your age, sexual expression, personal pleasure, and unfettered access to reproductive health are human rights. And I cannot stress enough the movement on the pleasuring and having pleasure. And it was about 5 years ago, I was testifying in Reno, Nevada, and they had some Advocates for Youth curriculum. And Advocates for Youth is another big one that is right along Planned Parenthood and SECUS. And in the subcommittee, in Nevada, they have a subcommittee that picks sex ed, and then it goes to the school board. They had this one crazy lady that liked apparently Dr. Kinsey, because when it was talking, there was some reference made to boys masturbating in the curriculum, and they were discussing 5th grade curriculum. And she said, well, we should also talk about, there's just nothing that really talks about the pleasure of girls, that we find pleasure too. And I'm just sitting there going, am I crazy? Like, we're having this conversation, this was 5 years ago, in public, about 5th graders and pleasuring themselves? Like, that's what you want to make sure is in the health, shame-free world. They're very big on saying we don't want to shame them. You don't want to shame anyone, so you don't want to tell them it's wrong. A diseased world. We're finding more and more that they talk about how, actually, I just read a little bit of the curriculum that just came out in Clarksville, and they do this kind of downplaying of any sort of sexually transmitted disease because there's medicines for it. Some curriculums talk about AIDS and how Obamacare was good because then they can get lifelong medicine and actually live longer lives. Advocates for Youth has that. So it's to the whole point, it is not the health of our kids. You need to know that. These are opposing worldviews. As much as we believe that this is something that the Lord gives us, that it's supposed to be celebrated in marriage, they really believe they are sexual from birth, and we and you are just kind of in the way of them expressing that and showing them that. So I'm going to kind of speed up a little bit so that we can get to question and answer. Oh, first we need to get to Tennessee, which is going to be a lot of fun. So, I've been doing a lot of FOIA requests, and this is a common language that comes out in my FOIA requests. And they repeatedly say, so when you are getting the emails and they're talking internally, this one is in particular is from Memphis schools, and they're talking about email exchanges, and they're prepping their presentation they're going to give to the teachers. They always say that family life is really sexual health education, that they call it family life, but the CDC calls it sexual health education. And if you read through the emails, they actually talk about how it's better to say family life in front of the parents, and that to the public, that's the language that we use. As a matter of fact, they talk about it being abstinence-centered, but not abstinence only, again, which is not true in Tennessee law. So anyway, this came directly out of one of our FOIAs this one was Memphis, but what you see on the left is one of the Department of Education from Tennessee, one of their preferred curriculums, and you kind of see the arrow there. That's because in addition to reading the law, I try and purchase all the curriculum, because we found out in California, if you don't purchase the curriculum, you don't know what's really in there, because what came with this curriculum was a flash drive. Tennessee Department of Education is saying this is an approved curriculum. What do you think is on the flash drive? All sorts of stuff that Tennessee law doesn't allow you to teach. So, a couple of years ago, prior to a few years ago, sex ed was just based on the teen pregnancy rate. And there were only, 5, 7 counties, it was under 10, that were mandated to teach sex education. And the legislature, I know they were well-intended thinking, because we have really great laws, and we do. And if you didn't get a handout, raise your hand, because we did a handout for the top 10 laws in Tennessee, and we'll get you that. So there's really good laws in Tennessee. So I think they thought, oh, okay, this is gonna be really good, we're gonna make sure. But it prohibited any group, like in Clarksville, if we wanted to say, no, we don't want sex ed. So they passed a Tennessee law, and it was only for the middle and high school, except this year they've introduced a bill to go all the way down to kindergarten. But here's what people don't know, and this is why I'm very interested to see what the FOIA looks like when I get it back from your school district. SB 646, that's a bill that never made it out of committee. Yet, Department of Education sent it out to several school districts telling them this is the law, and so you've got to have curriculum to follow it. And I'll give you an example how we found this out. I'm sitting in Clarksville, Tennessee. I had just moved here from California. I wasn't going to get involved yet in Tennessee because I've been doing so much in California. And I saw something on Facebook, and actually 2 of the moms now work for me because we've got to get busy here in Tennessee. So I saw this thing about them doing sex ed, and I knew what the sex ed law was, and I was like, whoa, I need to find out about this. Literally, they had sent out a notice. They had said that sex ed, we have to teach it because of this bill, and we have 3 curriculums that we have picked, and we want you all to come look at them and let us know what curriculum you want us to pick. So I called the office, and I asked if I could come in and see the curriculum, because a lot of it's hidden behind walls, or you go to look for it, and I know what to look for. They wouldn't have a link to it, or they wouldn't have something that was supposed to go with it. And so I called up, and she goes, yeah, you can come in at Friday. I've got a 1 o'clock or a 2 o'clock. And I said, oh, I'd like to have both 1 and 2. I think she knew she was in trouble then. So I went in, and I said, and by the way, I can't access everything, so could you have everything printed for me? She did. It literally had 2 of those kind of like lunch trays, those plastic. What parent is supposed to go through all of that? Anyway, so I go in there. I then start asking her for certain things where they were trying to line it with the standards, and they'd have something, and I'd be like, well, that isn't here. Could you get that for me? She goes, oh, those are things we're not going to use. They're in another room. Do you still want me to go get it? Yes, I want you to go get it, because right now you're saying you're going to use it because this is your writing, not mine. So she goes and gets it, and of course it was all stuff we wouldn't want to have. But on here you can see, so one of the laws, and number 2, the importance of effectively using contraceptives and barrier methods. Do you know Tennessee law explicitly prohibits that? Who from the Department of Education is sending this out? Not only is this Clarksville, but I got Memphis's. This is Memphis. I don't know anyone in Memphis. If you do, let me know and I'll go in and help you change it. They built their curriculum around this. It's on all of their slide presentations they did for parents. It talks about the age of consent, and that the age of consent, an affirmative, conscious, voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity is required for valid consent. 2 things. Tennessee law does not say that. And when Tennessee law says age of consent, they tell them that they're not supposed to be having sex under 18, not how to violate the law by getting a girl to say yes. So this is why I don't really trust what's going on in Tennessee. So here's an example of what the real law says and what they're saying. See how it says they wanted them to be age of consent, puberty, pregnancy. That other bill that never became a law. Here's something that we were able to push back on in Clarksville, and we were able to get them to stop, and they literally just finished the process. So this was a year ago, and they were ready to vote on it the following week. But we threw a fit. We said, you have the wrong law. So they had to kind of send out another email that said, oh, here's the real law, but here's the standards. We're still adhering to the standards. And they did a big public meeting, and they invited all of the parents. And literally, I kid you not, on every single wall was a life-size blown up something of the standards, not Tennessee law, but the standards. And they were showing the standards from the Department of Education, which we all know not to trust. You guys, of all people, should know that. And they were trying to justify everything they had because they said it aligned with the standards. Law was nowhere to be found. So that was really interesting. So we went back and told them, oh, there's some more laws that you haven't looked at. And I bet I'll find that your county didn't do this either. But you must have a public hearing. And a public hearing is not a school board meeting. And when they put this in the law, they were dead serious. Not only does it says you shall have the opportunity to speak and express your opinion and concerns, that's not a school board meeting. And it also says that each school district, these leaves. So it talks about how important it is to get community buy-in and to address the concerns that the community needs to be on board. And then it talks about they should undertake appropriate measures, whether in a public hearing or in parent conferences, to ensure and maintain the highest level of community and parental support. They don't get to just do their own thing. We went back again. I'm a big fan of Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals, so this is so bad to say in a church, but I don't mind mocking. So when we went to one of the school board meetings, I made this big chart of the 75 people in charge of curriculum. And I was like, how are you missing this? And do you not know how a bill becomes a law? And just kind of mocked them that. So when they then were moving forward with curriculum again, I had to mock them again and tell them, you can't do this. Let me explain the law again. I'm not an attorney, just play one at work. Here's another sample. So one of them, this is directly out, Department of Education in Tennessee recommends the Michigan model, directly out of the Michigan model. I took this and I read this before the school board. I read the part that says, take the condom off correctly to avoid infection after having sexual intercourse. And I went on. The school board members were going like this, totally a violation of Tennessee law. And it was one of the curriculums they were promoting. In addition to that, do you know that Planned Parenthood helped write this? Another violation of the law. Tennessee, this is one of the 3 that they're still pushing. So again, we'll see what you guys have when the FOIA comes through. All right, we're going to play this one, which is going to be a lot of
I have
fun.
a thought. Now, I know the trolls are going to be like, uh-oh, she should have stopped there, but I'm not going to do that. So there's a lot of controversy about whether or not sex education, health education, relationships, gender, all that stuff should be taught in the classroom. Here's what I think. You as in parents, send their kids to school to learn math, reading, writing, history, science from a professional, right? But in the same token, a lot of people who do that also think that they're experts in sexuality education because they've had kids. With all due respect, just because you've had kids does not mean that you are a sexuality education expert. It does not mean you are an expert in sex. It does not mean you are an expert in the body. It does not mean you are an expert in gender. It does not mean you are an expert in relationships. So the same way that we're sending our kids to school to learn these skills, these life skills like math and quadratic equations and calculus and whatever else from a professional, we also need to be ensuring that our students are learning information about their health, about identity, about very complex issues from a professional. I mean, like, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Thomas Sowell wrote a book called...
I mean, like, it makes sense. Like, you want your teaching... Like, I don't know anything about sex after 4 kids and 4 grandkids, and sorry for anyone that's offended, but I've had...
Thomas Sowell wrote a book.
I have a thought. Now, I know the truth.
Because I want to tell you why I don't trust what's going on in Tennessee and why I don't think we're really safe and we need to wait on the FOIA, and then I'm going to end with that. So right after that new law was passed, this comes from a Planned Parenthood press release. Planned Parenthood of Tennessee and North Mississippi have hired a health educator whose job will be to examine current sex ed programs, including those within Hamilton County Schools, and offer a comprehensive sex education curriculum meeting the National Education Sexuality Standards. Again, those aren't official, they're all Planned Parenthood and SICAs. We are gathering signatures to present to the school district now. After that law was passed, Planned Parenthood hired a person to go around to all the school districts. We wonder how this SB 646 got sent out to everyone, and then Planned Parenthood's following up with them. If I were a teacher, I wouldn't know any difference that 646 never got made it out of committee. And if I'm being told this is what the law says, and so I have to pick curriculum that does this, and then, of course, you're getting the standards from the school district, from the Department of Education, and it aligns with the standards, you can see how they're ending up with curriculum that violates the law. So I'm just going to end with Candace
Thomas
Owen.
Sowell wrote a book called Inside the Education System, and he spends a chapter talking about sex ed, which didn't exist before the 1970s in schools. And the pitch was, well, the kids are having sex anyway, so we should just teach sex education so that they practice safe sex. And that was a complete myth and a lie. The majority of students were graduating with their virginity intact in the 1960s. After they placed in sex ed and they sort of started telling children, oh, everybody's doing it, kids started just doing it. And now the majority of kids graduate school without their virginity. The point and why a lot of these programs were funded by Planned Parenthood was to sexualize children. That's what they wanted kids to start having sex. There's money to be made. Kids are buying condoms. There's money to be made with the textbooks that they're giving to school. And so I believe that sex education should not be taught at school. And I think that especially now that they're part of sex education can be, hey, you also may not need your testicles anymore. Just get rid of them and you can be a woman.
So I always end my talks with this William Wilberforce quote, because we can't say we didn't know now that we've kind of been shown it. I want to encourage you guys to sign up for our Tennessee mailing list where we will be sending out information. I told Robin that I would stay in touch with her when we get the FOIA. The last time they responded to me, they needed some time to get a quote together, to which I responded again, I want it electronically, or I'd be happy to come down there and look at it. I can spend all afternoon looking at sex ed. Happy to do it. So before we go into questions, Candace Owen ended, and that is CRI's position. CRI's position is that sex ed is not belong in schools no matter what. I don't trust the other side. I don't want someone else teaching my children this. It's not, they're going to do it anyway. I know there are different points of view on this with sexual risk avoidance and all of that. Tonight isn't the night to get into that. I think both sides of that agree that this garbage in Kinsey does not belong in our school. And I think we can agree to disagree on the other. Like I said, I will let Robin have everything that we get back from the school district. We will also, as other districts are coming in, we will reveal them. If you know anyone in Memphis, they need to know that they've proceeded this way after a whole year with a law that isn't the law. And it was only by fluke, by God, really, that I saw something on Facebook, and sex ed is my thing from California. And I was like, that's not the law. Someone needs to go tell them. And I did. So if we have time for questions, do we have time, Robin? Yes. She's got a microphone. She's coming.
Hey, I just wonder if you don't mind putting up the 646 again. I feel like
Sure.
I need a review of it.
And I think Robin is also taping
Thomas
this.
Sowell wrote a book called
I have.
Well, and what's kind of funny on the 646, so when I left that meeting with her, and I waited till the end to say, oh, by the way, all of this violates the law. And she said, no, it doesn't. Here it is. And I said, that isn't the law. So on the way home, she said, I said, how did this get here? Like, how did this get sent out to the school? She goes, oh, Anthony, who's the PR person who does the press release, he must have done it. I was like, that's sex ed language. Like, that isn't a fluke, a mistake. You have to know what you're doing to have that kind of language, especially on consent. She goes, well, maybe it was a law that wasn't a law. So I'm driving home, and I tell everyone not to trust anyone in the school system, even if they go to your church or they just don't believe it. And because she had an accent, and I was kind of new to Tennessee, and she's like, oh, my kids, I wouldn't want that stuff for my kids. I had started to believe her. She said that, and I thought something weird. And then I'm driving home, and I'm like, she knows. It must have been a law that wasn't a law. And I called my legislative gal in California, and I'm like, could you find out if this was a law that tried to be a law in Tennessee? And sure enough, and I was like, she lied to me. I broke my own rule not to just believe them. So there's more questions.
First question is, how did Kinsey get its funding to do this research? And the second one is, I heard it was done in the 1940s when the men were gone off to war.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And 1947 is when he started doing his, and then it was like in the 60s that it was taken on, and that's when Planned Parenthood and Seekers and Playboy, Hugh Hefner had a lot of money involved. I actually couldn't tell you. I will look into it, but I can't remember who funded Kinsey's original work. It might have been. That doesn't surprise me. I'm happy to get back to you because I have all of Judith's books. But the men were gone. So he was going to prisons and sex offenders and rapists.
I was hoping you could expound on how it's possible that the State Board of Education can put out a standard that is clearly against state law.
The thing with standards, there's two different, one, first of all, they don't look at the law, nor do they care, as you know, like with critical race theory. So, nor does the governor. I'm just going to say that for the record as well. Okay, I got to tell you something kind of funny. I got to meet DeSantis on Saturday night, and he was coming through, and I was like, Governor, thank you. I'm from Tennessee. We have Governor Lee. And I said, he was going around at Lincoln Day dinners saying he was a DeSantis, but he wasn't bragging like DeSantis. I'm like, he's no DeSantis. I told it. Anyway, because I was like, he's no DeSantis. And we all know that, those of us that live here. We wish we had a DeSantis. Anyway, we're a nonpartisan organization. Let me say that right now for the record. That was my personal point of view. So anyway, Department of Education, the standards are much more vague. like it might say can't discriminate or something, and they'll take that and say, see, this section on sexual orientation fits that standard. Let me also say that standards are just, they're kind of like bowling lanes. They aren't hard and fast. You don't have to do them or not do them like the law. They are a big picture thing. And I can tell you, if you went through standards in any, so I actually sat on the standards board to rewrite the standards in Nevada, the health standards. Every single one of those is not followed. I mean, even if you went to the math standards, it's not like every single one in every single school in every single grade. They're a big picture thing. But the left uses them because they don't have the law on their side and they know they can't get what they want in the law. And so they push standards. Parents don't know the difference. I walked into that room. Every parent, they don't know. They just go, oh, that standard, and oh, look, our school's complying. Parents don't know. You can shout at me if you want, I guess. Oh, sorry.
I am curious about the TCA 496-1304 for the LEAs not being able to use services of any individual or organization that endorses student abstinence as appropriate or acceptable or promote gateway sexual activity. Does this apply to GLSEN or GSA or Pride clubs at all?
Okay, a couple things. Which number on this? Because there's a lot of
Number 2.
Okay. Well, this does apply, I would argue, and I asked ADF this, it does apply to the Michigan model, so I don't know how they're getting away with that. Put my lawyer hat, not one just played at work. A GSA club is going to be different. That's a private club. What was your other stuff? The stuff on gender identity, gender expression? Yeah, no, because the school district, it's kind of like, okay, she said, so the essence of what they're doing in the club violates that law. And I would say that's true, but it's a private club. For instance, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. You aren't going to be able to proselytize in front of the classroom, but at FCA luncheon, you are. And you're allowed to bring a speaker in. And there was actually, it was in Tennessee, you guys still all have a lot of good news clubs. And Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, is the only one in California that I know has one. My husband volunteers on Thursday night at ours in Clarksville. It was that case that actually allowed for GSA clubs because you can't deny one or the other. However, CRI has a policy when you take over your school board that says, and we've been promoting this, that says any school club has to have the parents' permission. And so before your kid can join a GSA club, because I will tell you, and we've got some information on our website, the big trend now in California are sex ed clubs. And yeah, they do peer-to-peer, and they come in and they can have them. And then they're getting peers to sign up with them. And then that cute boy, you know, you're a 14-year-old girl and you want to go to this club that cute boy, I went to Young Life for the cute boys, but who knows at school if you're going to go. And so I think either you have to get rid of clubs altogether, which is an option for school districts, or I think that you can put a parental notification and consent before a child gets to attend one of those private clubs for that very reason.
Okay. Yeah, I've been approaching that actually in Williamson County, and it seems that some schools are putting that in their parent policy handbook, but others are just posting the clubs on their website and saying that they're following the law, and there's no notification that parents can opt out. So I'm prepared to dispute that.
Well, because opt-out doesn't fit, because it's a private event, whether it's after school, it's not even like chess, well, it would be like chess club, but it's not like band that's official with school. And that's where they get away with it, and they know it. They know it. We'll go up here. Sorry, I started doing that, and then Robin had people with microphone. Yes, sir.
Oh, you want me? Yeah, Karen, I'm from Clarksville, too, and I don't know if I'm supposed to do this. I shout in class when I teach. I haven't taught in a couple of years, had a stroke, so if I say the wrong word here, just forgive me. Those bastards in Clarksville and the school board are all Democrats. The last 4 we voted on, all the Democrats won. No Republicans won. There's one guy there, Kevin, I think it is, that is reasonably conservative.
He voted no on the Hillsdale Charter School. I don't know how conservative that is, but go ahead.
I don't know how you get around this. The last standards that I saw when Tennessee came out with their last group of science standards, because I'm a physicist, and I ended up teaching physics at Fort Campbell for the last 33 years. And I give a dang about my students. And I give a dang about my society and what we turn into. And it seems like we got to get to the school board. Do you think if we changed the school board in Clarksville, it would make a difference if we could get rid of those communists?
Well, first of all, I think Kent. It's Kent, right, with a T. Kent. And by the way, when we're done, you need to see these two ladies, because we have a big group that's starting with the Republican women about some of the stuff in the schools there. I think Kent would do the right thing if he's forced to do the right thing, which is sad. That's sad. And then Erin Mayberry, who attends Mosaic Church, they get in there and it's a go along to get along. So we kind of have a plan, because I also believe there's a few of them on there that wouldn't stand up against the community if the community came out on something. And I will tell you, have any of you seen our video in the book Trans? And we did a video where you have to click through. It is the most pornographic stuff I've ever seen. We were successful in helping a parent get it removed from Clarksville High School. However, it's in other schools in Clarksville, and it is the most obscene, pornographic I've ever seen. Book with QR codes that take you to R-rated sites, X-rated sites.
If I could say one more thing, this time I'm going to shout. When those standards came out in the state of Tennessee, and Billy, I like his wife, she's a wonderful lady, okay, she's always kind to me, but he has Penny Swin in there running the state education department, and everybody knows where did he come from in the last, our elections in Tennessee are corrupt. It's not an election process, it's a selection process. The voter registrations are all out of whack. I don't want to, when the standards came down for science education in the K through 12 or the high schools, I grabbed that and I spent the whole night going over it, trying to figure out what was going on in high schools and all, not just physics, but biology and everything else. And every course has climate change, because they're going to want to use this as the hammer to get us.
Well, let me say that this is why it is so important what Robin's doing and you guys are doing and sharing that information. Because one of the things, and I actually had to say this to Governor Lee's pastor's wife when she told me, and she's a friend and I really like her, but she told me, no, he's a conservative. And I said, he's not when it comes to education. I said, Reagan had a saying, personnel is policy. And in my experience, what I have found is when someone really wants to keep the bad policy, they keep the bad person so they can blame it on that person. And he has aspirations for higher office. So it's important that we continue to share the truth about Governor Lee and that he's not a conservative. He's got some conservative policies and values. I'm not questioning his faith or his relationship with the Lord. No, I'm not going to question it. But he is not governing from a biblical worldview. And that's the difference. And I don't know why, it's not mine, but we need, again, standards are where the left is kind of getting us. in this whole thing. And again, please get on our mailing list. And I don't know if you attend church, but Awaken Church just started a culture impact team, and they want to host something on the library, books, and sex ed. So we're going to do something with them. Joy.
Yes. Okay. So my name's Joy, and I live in Sumner County. For the past 21 years, I have been teaching abstinence education in schools in 13 counties of Tennessee, formerly in Williamson County from 2007 until 2020. We were actually sitting in Jason Golden's office the day the governor came down and closed the schools. I want to go back to the standards, because the standards in Tennessee prior to 2018-19, it was 19. If you're familiar with how they do standards, the big four are reviewed every 4 years. And so they have a team of educators and college professors from all over the state, and they review the standards for science and math and social studies and English every 4 years. The non-big four are every 6 years. And so health education is a non-big four, so they get it every 6 years. When they came out with the new standards, what Karen's been talking about, they passed them in July of 2018, and they went into effect July 31st
wrote a book
of 2018. None of the teachers in the 13 counties that we were teaching in knew that the standards had changed, nor did we, because the former standards aligned with Tennessee code verbatim. If the code said this on item 1, that was standard 1. And you could line them up side by side, and they said the same thing. But what happened is that the national sexuality education standards that have been pushed, and I know who is in charge in Tennessee of writing the standards and overseeing the standards process. I've met with him 5 times. I know who he is. He knows who I am. And he will tell you that he had a bipartisan group of teachers, but he let it slip up in the meeting we had with him to say, when did the standards change and why do they not align with the law anymore? And he said that the Memphis teachers wanted this particular model to be taught in Memphis City schools. And so that particular group of teachers that were on the standard revision committee were the loudest, and so those standards caved to fit what they wanted. And so we should be in standard revision process right now in Tennessee for health education, which, it began in 2016, was released in 2018. So we should be in that revision process right now for the next set. And so I have spoken with legislators until I am blue in the face. I sat with the Michigan model open with Tennessee law next to it with one of our high-ranking state representatives, and I said, tell me why this is what the DOE chose as the preferred curriculum for the state of Tennessee when it violates right here, right here, right here, and right here. It's in complete violation of our law. So there's not any teeth, and that's what I think we need to be doing, is getting some consequences for these school districts and these rogue teachers and a lot of the teachers, like I said, they don't know the law. The school boards, and I even recommended that. I said, why are we not doing training for the school board to know the law, and then the administrators to know the law, and then the teachers to know the law? Because they're going to have to take that Michigan model curriculum and the law and lay it side by side to even figure out what they can teach. And teachers aren't going to do that. They don't have time. And it's become a hot mess because they're trying to pull one over on us because they want the national, and actually it's the global World Health Standards now. So it's not just Tennessee, it's not just national standards, it's the WHO and the CDC and all the global entities are pushing the standards. So until we get Mark Bloodworth in the Department of Education, who is over health education.
They'll bring in another one.
Exactly,
A couple of things. You can get some information from our website on the national sexuality standards because they're not really real. But Joy, you actually made my point. They changed the standards and then people went in and mandated the law on every single school district. And so now even if a Moms for Liberty group in a rural county doesn't want sex ed taught, you can't not teach it because that's the law. And I have a feeling when our FOIAs continue to come in, they are being told that 646 is what they and they've already done that. You'll start to hear things in the spring, which is traditionally when sex ed, family life is taught. So you're not going to, like, they're starting it in March in Memphis. They're starting it in March in Clarksville. You may not hear anything until spring. But you need, again, I will let you know when we get the FOIA, but that's the only way we're really going to know is by reading the emails and reading what they were using, because there are school districts that are talking about abstinence-centered. But we're going to talk about this, this, and this. I mean, the emails are totally different than what they put out to the public. And that's why you have to be really careful, because, again, it's a worldview, and they don't share Joy's or my worldview. It's a very progressive worldview.
But the bottom line is state law trumps. The state standards of the Department of Education do not trump the state law. The state law trumps the Department of Education.
I agree. Same with CRT.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have to hold them accountable.
Yeah, and there isn't teeth. I will tell you one law there is teeth in, because Alliance Defending Freedom wrote it, and I want you to know this one is not sex ed. ADF wrote the law that there's a private right of action if your child's privacy is violated in the bathroom at school. So that's something. So if a boy's going into a girl's restroom, when that law was written 2 years ago, there's a private right of action. It was happening the first day of school in Clarksville. I went to the school board meeting, told them they were going to get sued. They came up, they're like, oh, fill me in. I go, I told you what school it was, what teacher let them in the bathroom. You now need to fix it, because they were not taking the transgender student to a different bathroom. So Joy is right, there needs to be teeth, but unfortunately, Tennessee may have a supermajority of Republicans, but there's a lot of rhinos and a lot of people that lack total courage. Okay. Yes. I did do a public records request on how they comply with the law.
Sorry.
And so I should be getting that.
Okay. I just wanted me to, for the recording, I was just asking what Williamson County Schools are currently teaching in regards to sex ed, and it sounds like I need to speak directly to my children's school and then go up to where they will go into middle school and ask. Correct? Okay. Thank you.
Really, CSE came in through the school libraries. It didn't maybe come in through the curriculum, but it did come in through the library and through the Gale databases in the computers. And personally, I wonder if parents should just put the media center off limits and just not allow them to, I don't know if they can do that in a school, but just to keep them out of that whole area of the school.
Okay, one thing that parents are waking up to are the Gale, the EBSCO, all of that. So I'll just let you in on a little project that we're doing with 15 different states. I've talked with Chip Roy, who is really quite the champion when it came to all the speaker, before Kevin McCarthy, who I've known forever too, because he was in California. So far, when a local community has brought up Gale or EBSCO, it's always been poo-pooed as, oh, that just slipped through, or that's an exception. For instance, we've got some stuff that we're releasing where from Sango Elementary School in Clarksville, with 6 clicks you can get to porn. And you can get to porn from the Tennessee Electronic Library in 3 clicks. But that isn't just Tennessee. We picked 15 states, red and blue, with red and blue counties, and we're going to be presenting that to some of the congressional leaders about it, so they can't poo-poo it anymore, that it's not just one exception or somebody got through. And they're really of the mindset that they don't understand that it's a whole separate world you're going into, and so any software to block it isn't going to work. And so it's a project that we're working on and have been since this summer with FOIAs all over the 15 different states.
So I have 2 boys that were taught by Planned Parenthood in California, and I was naive.
What school district, out of curiosity?
Santa Ana.
Okay.
And I was naive enough to think that I trusted the school system, that it wouldn't be, that it was sex ed back when I had it in the 80s. And no, so I'm very passionate about finding out here. So I have a freshman at Franklin High. I went to the principal in December. I emailed him and I said, I'd like to see the curriculum because I'd like to review it over Christmas break. And he put it off to the PE, the head of PE. So I went to her and I emailed her. Then they both were CC'd on the message and said, well, we get the information from 2 people, and they actually gave me their names at the Tennessee Health Department. No email contact, but I'm kind of a sleuth, so I went online, found these 2 women, and emailed them. And I said, I'm a parent at Franklin High. I'd like to see the material you're going to be presenting to my son. And so they didn't get it to me over Christmas break, but I finally followed up and got it. And I would say it's a presentation. I can't believe it's the only thing that they're going to be teaching, but maybe I'm wrong. But it's about 96% is all about STDs and what you can do to prevent them with respect to medication and vaccines, et cetera. Very little with the whole bio piece of it. Here's the diagram and whatnot. And they said that's all that's going to be taught at Franklin High. So I don't know if that's true. I don't know if anyone in the room has any comments. Most parents have no idea. I didn't either. I trusted the school system in California and really, really regret it to this day. So that's why I'm very passionate about finding out.
2 things. First, I love a sleuth from California. We have a mom that was teaching at, well, she's a grandma that was teaching at a charter school that's doing some research for us. If you want to be part of our research team on like these projects, talk to one of our gals, because we're doing the one on the Gale and EBSCO. First of all, I don't believe that's the only thing, but here's another argument that we're making in Clarksville. There are a lot of good things in the law that they must teach. So if they're only covering STDs or STIs, they're not covering things the law says they have to cover. So I did an analysis of the proposed legislation and talked about how many times it said abstinence, and I talked about how many times abstinence was in the law. You know, the law had, I can't remember what it was, 17 times that you have to talk about abstinence once in their curriculum. So it's that kind of thing. There are several things that law says you must, and these 10 aren't all of them. But there are several things you must, and it repeatedly talks about abstinence. It repeatedly talks about the value of marriage. It repeatedly asserts that. So having the word marriage or abstinence in there once does not satisfy the law. So again, if you've got questions, you can talk with us, because I love me some sex ed.
So I'm just wondering if you have key action items for parents to take. So Kelly got the curriculum from Franklin High. Where do we go from there to find out what's in it, to prevent it from being taught to kids, other than just opting out our child? You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, I'm a big opter-outer, because I think that's the only way we're going to change things. If you have 17 kids sitting and opting out, and we've got a Tennessee that has been approved by Alliance Defending Freedom opt-out form. But here's some of your action items. Find out, but you need to verify. You need to ask for all supplemental, all videos. If there's someone from the Department of Health that has any influence in this, it's bad. And the other thing, I wanted to tell you about California, and this is a problem. Again, you can't, the left is so far ahead of us, they're not trying to do it at the state level. They're coming in through the side door, through our school districts, through SB 646. And parents don't know. I mean, they're told, this is what the law says. And they go, they have to, okay. Because again, they trust. In California, up in Redding, there's a charter school up there, and we got the memo of understandings from them. And literally, they brought Planned Parenthood in to teach. The contract with Planned Parenthood said that Planned Parenthood could get the data on the kids. And the contract also said that no one was allowed, and a teacher had to be in there to ensure that they were not being filmed by a student. That was in one of the contracts. Just so you know what you're dealing with when you're dealing with these people that are pushing this, whether they live in Tennessee, and we are a target. The red states are a target. In Sacramento, the PTA contracted with Planned Parenthood to come in and teach sex ed, which means that's not FOIAble, because the PTA is a private organization. Now, I got wind of it, so there were certain things I was able to FOIA, like who the PTA was communicating with in the school district. They hid it into the PTA budget under assemblies. So you're selling wrapping paper and cookies, and you're bringing Planned Parenthood into the classroom. There was a big write-up, I don't know if it was WorldNet Daily, I can't remember, this was several years ago, on that situation. So you need to know, I'm sure there are some good teachers that are teaching this, and hopefully they will be whistleblowers. There are a lot of really bad people out there teaching this stuff, and the ends justify the means to them. And they, just like you heard all those people, they really think those kids belong to them, and that you're the problem, not letting them embrace their pleasure of sexual being. I think we're done, sorry. Oh, I could say anal sex one more time, but I won't. I'm used to California where I say lots of bad words.
One more.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on Governor Lee's thinking, because when he was running in 2018, I had a chance to talk to him privately, and I said, I gave him a scenario. I said, if there was a bill that was on your desk that said boys couldn't use girls' bathrooms, would you sign it? He said no. He said no because we don't want to be like North Carolina or some other state. Let the courts handle it. So that's what he thinks.
It's funny because he signed it. But it is interesting. He does have much higher aspirations. Kristi Noem did the same thing when she vetoed the sports bill, or she signed it for the high school, and then she took so much heat, and then she came back the next year and she signed it for college, which Tennessee last year did the sports one in college too. So anyway, thank you all very much for listening. Sign up for our emails.
Thank you, Karen. That was an incredible presentation. And I want to comment, as the parent on the ground, is Tennessee has a veritable trash heap of toothless bills. The age-appropriate materials, unenforceable. CRT, unenforceable. The governor's library bill from last year has only emboldened the woke librarians. And I have tried to personally caution Matt Walsh for SB1, HB1, that please do not add that one to the trash heap as well, because Tennessee and Governor Lee love to pass the bill, get the headline, get their 10-minute spot on Hannity, but then ultimately they're unusable, and the other side is just emboldened to keep doing what they're doing. So let's hope that that does not persist in this legislative session. So Tuesday of next week, we have CSE 102. That's with Kelly. And she's still in California. She's still fighting the battle there. And Karen, that's why I think I'm a big fan of 101 and 102, because people will inevitably come at a problem from different directions, and you will inevitably get a more complete picture of the issue. So while Karen did an excellent job of covering the issues here in Tennessee and the origins of CSE, Kelly, her expertise is Planned Parenthood, SECUS, the Advocates for Youth, and all the organizations behind those. So that's really going to get you up to speed on that. So please join us. It's virtual. It's free. It's on Zoom Tuesday at 6 p.m. Recommended reading on this topic, the book club read Strange New World by Carl Trueman, and that is a broad-based tracking of how activists and thinkers have shaped the culture to permit this to happen. And you even heard in some of the videos where the sex ed guys like, well, we want to help them find their truth, right? Because in today's definition of personhood and identity, it's all about your truth and your journey, and self is everything. So how do we get there? That book covers the journey. The other book is by Miriam Grossman, and she is the doctor that you saw Matt Walsh interview and also Pete Hegseth interview. And her book is an incredible, practical resource for parents. I am going to keep it for when my daughter comes of age, because there's chapters in there that I'm just going to read to her. It's a complete medical accounting of what they need to know. So we recommend both. In our resource library, by the end of this week, our CSE toolkit will be live. This presentation will be posted, and we will start building that collection of articles and research and data that will help you with any questions that you need. And if you have any suggestions, please email us, and we'll get it put on the toolkit as well. So to wrap up, February is CSE month, and we are in the process of going down our laundry list of things to get parents and grandparents and citizens fully educated and up to speed and informed and equipped on these ideologies, so that when you go speak to your principal and they're like, oh, you know, a half-truth here, a half-truth there, you're like, no, I actually know more about this than you do. I'm informed and equipped, and you can't BS me. So that's what parents need to do. You got to get in the driver's seat and advocate for your child, because amongst all these organizations and agendas and political agendas and careers and whatnot, you're the only one putting your child first. So please connect with us on social media. If you found this event to be of use to you, please consider a donation to fund future events. And thank you for coming from the bottom of my heart.
I believe that it's rare. Only red-hairs people do that. The first rays of the sun hit the fresh green leaves, and a rabbit not many weeks old show some trust to a perfect stranger, and I wanna feel and see more, but I'm trapped inside. I'm a prisoner of the past, though I know that things don't last. I'm going home, but I don't know the way. If I'm lucky, I'll live halfway. If I'm unlucky, I only have today. What kind of weird plan is this? What needs to be shown is nowhere to be known. In the desert lands of the Western Kingdom leaves me cold. Gone is the